Hey guys, welcome back to our Castle Painting Masterclass. And this is our part 2 of the 4-part series. And last week we have learned everything about drawing, from drawing the basic shapes to some of the more elaborate, complicated castles and architectural styles. So today we're going to start studying the lighting conditions and start applying shading to the drawings we have done last week, so that we can understand how to bring out the right mood and further emphasize the architectural elements that we would like to highlight. All right, without further ado, let's dive in. But before that, a real quick announcement. If you're ready to take your art practice to the next level, or you simply would like to support me for my ongoing effort of producing high quality learning content, then I also have a Patreon membership program for you to check out. As a member, you'll be able to attend online painting workshops every month, joining on Q&A live sessions and discussions, as well as receiving individualized critique and feedback from me. You will also get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content where I will show my work in progress, as well as talking about other aspects of being an artist. All right, back to the main topic. So what we're going to do here is we're going to first just observe the shadow as is, based on the photograph, and we're going to evolve it and maybe try a different angle of lighting in that shifted perspective we have drawn underneath. The first castle here is side lit. It's a pretty low sun angle, which means it's probably late afternoon or early morning. And this type of lighting combined together with this eye level angle of the castle really convey a sense of peacefulness and stableness, with the mid-tone and darker tone values primarily on the roof, since it's darker, as well as casted by this tower onto the side building here. The only tip I want to call out here is when we're shading a cylindrical shape like this tower, there are several ways to achieve it. And one way is to pre-wet the surface and then only just add one line to the right-hand side and let it blend. So it will create a soft edge shadow. And one thing I would like you to observe is that what really makes the castle pop are actually these large midtones created by the trees behind the castle. And without that, the castle would seem really flat. And that's a key here, which is if you want three-dimensionality, you'll want to strive for a pretty healthy amount of mid-tone values surrounding the subject if the subject is brightly lit, in which case castles and buildings are. They are typically brighter than the foliages and the sky. I'm going to show you what I mean by that further by demonstrating in the second castle we have drawn below, which was turned into an area view. So because of in the area view, the top surfaces like the grasses and lands behind the castle become much bigger. If I were not to paint the grass as well as the trees into a light tone and a mid-tone, then the castle and the land would just become one flat surface. So even though in the photo there is probably not any immediate trees behind the castle, I can still add some trees here and there. And at these darker tones will really create and places for the eyes to rest on across this painting. So that is the first tip. Strive for a healthy balance of light, mid, and dark tone in your painting. In the second castle here, let's explore how the castle will feel like if you give it a front-lit angle versus a backlit angle. The original photo we have is a front-lit angle with pretty much the entire surface of the castle in the high key. Only the side of the building is in shade. Again, this repeats what we learned from the first castle, which is that without the foliage, actually, there is very little mid-tone on this building, which will make the entire painting seem a bit flat. But thankfully, we have these trees in front of the castle, and as soon as we painted that, it will tie together the whole painting and make it look balanced. Now for the second composition, let's shift the angle of the sun and pretend that the sun is coming behind the castle, with only the top of the castle being lit. This means the majority of the shape of this building will be in a mid-tone range. So with this change, what immediately become more apparent are these roof lines with these miniature towers and all of the towers in between these buildings. But also it makes the castle looks more monumental as it's like looming in the distance. So then what will create kind of the visual interest in this case are these little details that we further add within that large shadow shape, such as the windows, but also the top of these trees, which will also be brightly lit. So by leaving out certain white areas within that large shadow shape, you create places for the viewers to rest their eyes on, and these makes a really good contrast and focal point. Castle number 3. So the initial photo really caught my attention because it's got these prolonged shadow shape on the entire lawn. I thought that is really cool as is. So that large shadow shape, in contrast with these mini shadows casted by the figures on the lawn, really create that tension and create that drama for us. So think about that, sometimes the best way to depict your subject and to tell the story is through the shadow they cast, not necessarily through depicting the object itself. So for the modification, I'm going to attempt actually turning this lighting into a side lit angle. The side lit angles, you will see that it really helps, emphasizing the architecture itself as versus kind of the surroundings. And in this case, it also works because this castle is made out of very different geometric shapes, but it has these like different sizes of rectangles. So that allows for a really interesting shape of the shadow, and therefore the painting will still look pretty dynamic. And in terms of the background, for the side lit angle here, it's going to be darker than the backlit angle, because then the background makes these sunlit surfaces of these towers more pronounced, as versus in the backlit situation here, if we make the background too dark, it's going to compete with the shape of our main castle here. Okay, moving on to the last example, also our most complex castle. Here I'm actually going to just bite the bullet by painting exactly as seen in a photo where the weather is actually overcast. So what's going to happen if you have a very complex object with a lot of three-dimensionality, but in an overcast weather, the contrast between the walls, the roofs, as well as the background will just be much lower. And especially this castle is a dark color castle. So having that against a pretty dark background, which typically are these forests and foliage, it will actually come across more as a pretty eerie looking scene, almost like a haunted castle, really. That's good if that's what you're going for. Just in general, I think overcast weather combined with complex shapes, it will make your subject appear more of a gloomy look as versus a bright, energetic look. And for the bottom one here, I'm trying to change it into a backlit angle as well. So changing it to the backlit angle, the roof line definitely become more interesting and pronounced. It does downplay these groupings of the buildings, right? And making them look more as like one entity as versus 3 different groups of buildings. So that is another thing about a backlit lighting, is that it has the power to kind of unite the shapes into one large shape, as versus the side lit angles will tend to separate these individual objects and buildings. So that is another thing to keep in mind when you're shifting the angles of the sun or painting at different time of the day. Cool. So far we have learned how the different angles of lightings will impact the mood and characteristics of these architectures. Next, I'm going to paint the rest of the castles together and discuss some of the more kind of tricky scenarios where different shapes of architectures meet and what kind of shadows that they tend to create. So finish the other castles here. I feel like this one is very identical to that, although the shadow is just on the left hand side. This cylindrical shape is a bit of a challenge when you have multiples, but you're alternating between the clean brush and the shadow color to alternate and create this soft blending. Right. One thing to call out is that, you know, if there's a hard cast shadow on these cylindrical objects, such as this building is casting a little bit of shadow onto the cylindrical surface, that cast shadow will still be a sharp edge, right? Only the shadow on the cylindrical itself is soft edged. This Italian villa castle, I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, you can treat the pillars as pretty much the wall when you're drawing, right? But when you're doing painting, especially when the sun is hitting the front, this corridor is going to create a bit of shadow, which then like will bring it downwards and kind of halfway there, right? This roof will have the shadow casted on the wall behind these pillars, right? Similarly for that one, it will just become, this surface is already facing away from the sun, so the area between these pillars will become even darker. So this is the only one that has the dome in it. So the way you can paint the dome is this one has the spines on the dome. So what that means is that, you know, instead of like a gradation kind of like shape for the dome using the wet on wet, each facet of the dome would just needs to get, you know, one shade darker as it turns away from the sun. So this two areas gonna be a bit darker than this, right? The spine, you can just come in with like a thin brush to kind of emphasize the shadow, the shape of the spine. But what's great about this dome, I think, when it's backlit, is that you have these light coming through these archways. So they're really emphasizing the shape, that these are like, you know, pillars and light shine through, and that is beautiful. And here, I don't know if you can see it, but this part where, you know, because the sun is coming behind the building. This part where, you know, this building ends, this tower sticks out. The sun will, you know, light some portion of the tower as well. Arguably, this tower should have a bit of sunshine on this upper part as well, similar as here. I think here it got overlooked, but yeah, the tower should have a bit of like sunlit surface, just a bit on the right as well. And everything in between here, you know, like the statues and the niches will become even darker. So I use like a darker tone. But I think the idea here is that the niches will have a bit of like a soft edge niche. So it's not, you know, like a flat window shape like that. So inside these niches, the top may get a bit of like a darker and then transition gradually into, you know, a medium gray color. This one, the last one, is the German style Renaissance like roof that has these like onion shape. The thing I really want to, you know, talk about is when you have this dome that curves inside and outward. The rule of thumb here is just to remember, like, you know, if it's curved outward, so like the sun, you know, usually from the top will light up the surface. So even though this surface is facing away from the sun, the top of this curve is brighter. Right. Similarly, at this part where it curves inwards and then back up again, the part that curved inwards will have a bit of shadow here. So then even within, you know, these shape, you'll have a little bit more kind of like tiers of shadows depending on how the roof line curves. So that is the main tip here I want to give an example for. And yeah, and some of these architecture details, like you can just use dry brush mark or use a much darker color to emphasize that within this mass of a shadow. So we have reached the end of our part 2 of the Castle Painting Masterclass. What we have learned today is what are some of the effective ways to bring out the three-dimensionality of our subject, and also how to choose the right lighting conditions to convey the right mood. However, so far we only really discussed kind of the castle itself with very minimal attention paid to their surroundings. But in reality, the location chosen for these historic landmarks is part of the story, and they're usually very unique and magnificent. So we will want to include the surroundings as well in our painting. So next class is all gonna be about composition, to learn about how we can develop an eye for the right composition, to avoid a repetition, symmetry, as well as boredom. Because we're not here to create an architectural rendering of sorts, right? We're here to tell a story throughout painting. So yeah, next class will be filled with inspirations, examples, and a lot of photographs. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the next class. Bye.